All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Butler. I'm a state representative from the 87th District. I live here in Springfield. I'm joined today by Representative Avery Bourne from the 95th District, who lives in Morrisonville. And we're here today to once again talk about the automatic voter registration. On December 13th, Secretary of State's office notified State Board of Elections that there was an issue with automatic voter registration in Illinois. January 20th, after it came out publicly that this letter had been sent, we called on myself and the members of the House Executive Committee. The Republican members called for a hearing, sent a letter to the Speaker. On January 22nd, we had a news conference in this very room talking about AVR, and I called on the State Board of Elections at that time to perform an independent audit of AVR. On January 29th, the State Board of Elections, with a vote along partisan lines, voted down a motion to perform a review of the automatic voter registration in Illinois. January 29th, the Secretary of State's office admitted they were sending 16-year-olds through the system to local election authorities. February 5th, we had an executive committee hearing, and at that time, we were assured by the Secretary of State that the problems were fixed. And Secretary White himself at that hearing said, "I've put my staff on notice. Zero tolerance will be the order of the day with the Secretary of State's office going forward." And I believe it was Chairman Welch who made the comment that heads will roll if problems persist after this. February 7th, the Secretary of State told the State Board and local election authorities that they will not be transmitting information on the weekends when it came to AVR. February 14th, I introduced House Bill 5224, which would suspend AVR and perform a review and make sure that we're doing it right so we can get it back up and going correctly. On February 24th, Congressman Davis, a member of the U.S. House Administration Committee, convened an AVR Listening Session here in Springfield where Secretary of State, State Board, and finally local election officials were heard from. Again, we were assured that things were corrected. On February 28th, advocacy groups filed a lawsuit against Secretary of State and the State Board of Elections for, quote, bungling the implementation of AVR. And then this week, what we have that just came to light this week is at least over 1,100 Illinois citizens were improperly registered as opt-out. So what we have here in Illinois, what we've seen over the last couple months, is that we've registered non-citizens to vote while we're denying actual citizens their voting rights that they have in the state of Illinois. And I'm not convinced that 1,100 number is accurate. When you talk to the Sangamon County clerk, he says there was over 100 that were relayed to him that were an issue, when the State Board of Elections said it was only 20 that was relayed to him. So I think there's probably more than that 1,100 across the state. And I would say the communications on this has been terrible from especially the Secretary of State's office and the State Board of Elections. They know, they've been on notice for a couple months now that this is a problem. And I don't believe the legislature received word one about this most recent problem after they've been before the legislature for a hearing and before a congressional listening session as well. AVR is a complete mess today. And I think for myself personally, we've been assured for over 2 months now that the problems have been fixed, yet problems continue to come up. I've lost complete confidence in the Secretary of State being able to carry out this program. It is a disaster as we're looking at it today. March 1 was the deadline for anyone who was registering under AVR to be forwarded and be eligible for the March 17th primary. Obviously, people can still register to vote, but it's my understanding March 1 was the cutoff. Any AVRs after that wouldn't be eligible for the March 17th primary. So we have time now that AVR is done for the before the primary election to take a hard look at AVR. Today, I filed House Resolution 827. It's an audit resolution that calls for the State Board of Elections to engage in an outside, independent audit, not the Auditor General. And I think this is important. The Auditor General has an ongoing case before the State Board of Elections. I think we need an outside, independent audit to be performed on the entire AVR system. And as some of you may know, an audit resolution only needs to be passed by one chamber. It doesn't need both chambers. It only needs one chamber to trigger the audit. Additionally, I asked that House Bill 5224, which is the legislation that I introduced on Valentine's Day, which is the the suspension of AVR so we can review it. I asked that bill be released from the Rules Committee, and that we have the opportunity to have an up or down vote on whether or not we should suspend the AVR system in Illinois. And lastly, I call on the House Executive Committee. I know spokesperson Wheeler, who I talked to last night, had a conversation with Chairman Welch yesterday about this. But I would call on the Executive Committee to again have another hearing with Secretary White in attendance so we can hear directly again as to what the problems with AVR and how they're going to correct this latest issue and absolutely assure us that there will be no problems going forward.